What's up, y'all? My name is T. Shaw, and this is Brewing Black Podcast, where the contents we serve you is authentic, vulnerable, and relatable. That means we serve you with no cream and no sugar.
I guess I like my coffee black.
What's up, y'all? This is Scholar P, pronouns he, him, his.
And it's your boy T Shaw, pronouns he, him, his.
And welcome to Brewing Black Podcast, your favorite black podcast and topical podcast for those who like their subjects, like we like our combos. Black.
Yeah. So, let me do the land acknowledgments. This is the land of the Gabrielino and the Tongva. This is stolen land. This is colonized land. We will always, always, always pay those respects. And today we will be talking about policing in America, and this is a case for abolition. So first and foremost, over this past week, a young man by the name of Brandon Calloway was beaten, tased in his own home. And you might ask, T-Shaw, why? In his own home? What'd he do? Was it domestic violence? Was it something like that? No. This man failed to come to a complete stop at a stop sign. That's it. Failed to come to a complete stop. And when I hear that, I think of a Cali roll, and we all do it. We do it every day. I do it every day. I'm in California. You know, you got to keep it going so you don't come to a complete stop. And the police followed him. And from what I understand, the police didn't put on their sirens. They didn't put on their lights initially. So he kept going home. And at some point they did after following him, and he was scared to stop. As a black man in America, I completely understand. As a black person in America, I completely understand. If you don't understand what you did wrong and you're being pulled over, it's a scary scene. So he fled into his home. The police busted into his home, beat him with a baton, was tasing him from room to room, and dragged him out of his home. Beat the woman that attempted to help him as well. So this is what it means to be black in America and to break a law.
Absolutely. And then in Keeley, North Carolina, a new town manager, Justine Johnson, was hired. And after she was hired, there were it followed a mass resignation of the police chief there, 4 other officers, and 2 town clerks. And they cited a toxic and hostile work environment, which is interesting because you might be saying, Scholar P, well, what did they mean by that? You got to give us more details. You're a scholar, you're a researcher, aren't you? And the answer is yes, I am. But of course, they didn't actually cite what was wrong. All we know is that a black woman was hired, and all these folks who walked out are white. And for whatever reason, all of a sudden, the environment is hostile. So that's always interesting.
Yeah, and then our final case, in Mississippi, a police chief bragged about killing citizens. It is laughable. It's like because I don't want to cry, but he in a 17-minute audio, I believe filmed by a black officer, he captured his police chief not only bragging about justify or being able to kill people and justify it. So not only him, because he's caught, I think, 13 bodies. But he talks about how if any of his officers did it, he has the talent and he has the ability to be able to justify that and be able to talk and like get through the investigations. So I think we really see this as a problem because this can't be reformed, right? Like this can't be reformed.
Absolutely, yeah. I going back to the North Carolina situation. Something I didn't say is that Keeley, North Carolina, is not a big town. That was a whole police force. So it wasn't just that those people walked out. It was that they were willing to put their citizens at danger and at risk because they so anti-black. And so once again, so we have cops who are actively beating people, following them, beating them inside their homes, and beating citizens who are trying to help other human beings. Then we got them bragging about their past escapades. And then if you're like, okay, yeah, but not all, yeah, well, you got cops who are willing to leave you all in danger. Their anti-blackness is going to be the reason why the white folks in that town, white folks in that town are going to be put in danger because they'd rather be anti-black and stand on that morals to make sure you're safe. And so it becomes a thing of like, what are you good for? It's like that song, War, what is it good for?
Mhm.
Absolutely nothing.
Mhm.
All you doing is killing us, leaving us, or bragging about hurting us. Like, what
Yeah.
is, like, so.
And it like this made me think about too, like often when officers, when looking into these cases, like the two officers that beat Brandon Calloway, they were placed on administrative leave, and it's like that's often all that we get, right? We often will go protest for or write letters to get these officers fired and or arrested, but often they just get placed on administrative leave. Sometimes they might get fired, but even when they do get fired, they often get hired by another police department within a year. Maybe not in that town, sometimes maybe not in that state, but they're back on the force. So what I want to know is what are real solutions that we can have? Because this is indicative of policing in America, right? We showed you all multiple examples. So from a police officer, a police chief, right? Someone that is in charge of a police department talking about how killing, in quote, in his own words, niggers, how he can justify that, how he can put 117 rounds into a human body and get away with that. You can't reform things like that. You can't reform a department who hires a black town manager that might have even some pro-black views or some police reform views, right? And have that whole department quit, right? You can't reform police officers following a man into his home to beat him because he didn't stop, right? Because he didn't yield to your authority. When somebody runs a stop sign, especially if they go to their house, you got their license plate and you got where they live. You can issue a ticket easy.
Right.
But it's the show of force. And to me, that's something you can't reform. So when we're thinking about like reforming the police, I think we have to expand past like just calling for these officers to be arrested, because to me, this shows that there's more than just bad apples. Like it's a rotten tree. And we have to start to imagine what it looks like to have something outside of the police force as it exists. Our calls have to be just more expansive, and we have to look for restorative justice, because what we're getting right now is just not working.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when and like, I feel like it's so hard to think about those on the ground, like, or even systemic solutions, because it is so embedded. Y'all, this has been happening since policing has been a thing. But you gotta think, right? If I think that something is wrong, or if I'm afraid of the repercussions, then when something happens in Mississippi, if I'm in LAPD, I'm like, all right, well, let me be careful. Let me. Oh, you would think like all these people are getting killed, all these officers are being taken to trial. Like, let me be careful. But there's a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
Oh, I know how to work the system.
Yeah. They got me.
Right.
My union got me. My chief got me.
Right.
It's that thin blue line.
Right. Yeah. The thin blue line. So it's so, like you said, it's very hard to think about a way to reform, to like change the tree up. The whole thing is rotten, and like everyone is invested in this rotten tree because they don't have to eat the apples.
Yeah.
So I think it gets really tough to think about what we do from an immediate standpoint and then from a systemic standpoint. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was just in this training today, and this dean said something that really impacted me, and I had to write it down. She said most people's critiques against restorative justice is that it doesn't always work. She said it's not going to work every time, and that's okay. And it made me think that, like, yeah, because punitive measures never work. They almost never work, especially if we're talking about changing this behavior.
Right.
They don't do anything but punish. So she's saying, like, yeah, some people might not respond to this restorative justice, and we'll have to kind of think through that. And I'm reading this book from Marion Kaba, and it's on abolitionist organizing. It's called We Do This Till We Free Us. And in that book, she says that in the system, we've never had justice. So we don't know what it looks like. And it's going to be work, and it's going to be a process. So that reaffirms what that dean to me says, is that it's not going to work every time. But like, as we're trying to figure it out, like, let's commit to this, because at the end of the day, it's going to be better than what we have now. Because if the police is doing that, and I understand that all of those places were southern cities. It was Tennessee, it was Mississippi, and it was North Carolina. But Malcolm X told me anything under the Canadian border is the South. And we've seen it.
Ooh.
We've seen it in Cleveland, Ohio. We've seen it in Cincinnati. We've seen it in Oakland. We've seen it in LA. We've seen it in Boise. We've seen it in Las Vegas. It's nationwide. So when we're thinking about solutions, I think that we have to start to become willing and brave enough to imagine what a new system looks like.
I totally love that, because it's like it can't really get well. I'll never say that actually, because it can always get worse. But like it's pretty bad now, so it's like we only have so much to lose, and we're already losing the most valuable thing, which is our lives. So it's just like, I think I love that idea, this idea of being willing to try something that could be better anyway. And like, really, to your point, committing to the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations of restorative justice, and just seeing where we land.
Where we go.
And because I think all these things that are great systems today that like work and that are super smooth, they weren't always like that anyway, with anything anyway.
Exactly.
Right. And so I think, and I think that it's almost white supremacist thought to think, oh, this is law and order. And so why would we try to do something that's so drastic from law and order? Because, oh my gosh, society will fall apart. And if it's not perfect, we shouldn't, stray away from law and order. But I'm like, well, law and order definitely hasn't been perfect. So.
Yeah. And Miriam Kaba tells me that hope is a discipline. We talked about this last episode or 2 episodes ago, but hope is a discipline. It's a process, and it's committing. It's more than just optimism or hoping things go well. It's committing to that process and making sure that it works, but it's the belief that it will at the end of the day. And I think that that's what we have to have. And just being at LAUSD has taught me that, like, students organizing to get police off campus, there's still problems, right? There's still things that could happen where you might want police, but now there are counselors on campus that are trained in mental health crisis. There are more programs like ours that are geared toward getting young Black and brown men into college. And to me, those are more long-term solutions than just having police on campus to make us feel better. Because we have police, and it hasn't stopped mass shootings, and it haven't stopped any of this. So as we close out, I want y'all to know that, like, they have rolled back our Miranda rights. We have a Supreme Court that is staunchly conservative, and we will continue to see more rights rolled back. And until we continue to organize to start changing these systems, we will be victims to these systems. So, as we close out, we like to say, keep the coffee black. Peace, and we'll see y'all soon.